Welcome to Postcards to the Universe with Melisa Caprio. Do you believe in magic? What if you were told that all you had to do was get a little creative and work a magic spell to bring anything you can imagine into your life? Here on Postcards to the Universe, we will share manifesting, tips, postcards, creativity, abundance, and prosperity. Here is your host, Melisa Caprio.
Hey, and welcome to Postcards to the Universe with Melisa, creating the life you crave. How's everybody doing? I hope you guys are doing well. Today, technically, we're having a little, a blip. Usually, we take 2 commercial breaks, but I have been informed today we are not going to be taking any breaks, so we're going to go right through. So that'll be good. More talking for my guest Dana and I today, who's going to join me in just a few minutes. So I just wanted to share that. I have a really cool guest today. She's an artist and author, Dana Sardano, fellow Italian, and we're going to be sharing some of her work from her books, 10 Recommandments for Personal Empowerment and Decoding the Woo Woo. I love the titles. And Dana's going to join me out here in just a couple of minutes. For those of my regulars who do listen to the show all the time, you know why I'm saying we're not taking any commercial breaks, because you listen to me all the time, so you hear that we take commercial breaks, but we're not today. But I just want to say thank you again for joining me and being with me each week. I love having you here. But for those of you who are joining me for the first time, I want to give you a big warm welcome and say thanks so much for being here with me and listening to my show. I'm very excited to have you. And I'll just share a little bit about me. I'm a photographer. I'm an artist also. I'm an author. And I have a book, and it's titled Postcards to the Universe, Harness the Universe's Power and Manifest Your Dreams. And in the book, I have 30 manifesting stories along with the photographs that I took of the contributors manifesting postcards. And a manifesting postcard is kind of like a little mini vision board for people who know what vision boards are. Many people do. So that's what a manifesting postcard is. And in the book, I include a bunch of writing exercises, and it helps us get clear on what it is we want to manifest, because we're not always quite sure exactly what it is we want. We're just going for a feeling we want, which may be more joy, abundance, better health, so we're not really sure exactly necessarily how to be specific on what it is we want to manifest. So I have writing exercises, and it helps us get very clear on that. And there's also a toolbox full of fun exercises on how to manifest in the main areas. I call them the main areas, which is love, money, health, and career, right? We always want more abundance in those areas. So that's what I cover in the book. So if you're interested in doing the inner work exercises and reading people's really cool stories of transformation and how their manifestation became the reality, inspiration, it's really fun book to put together. You can purchase the book at your favorite bookstore or online. And every week I ask, and I will continue to ask because I love getting them, for people to send me a manifesting postcard. And if you need to know how to create one or what you should do, you can go to my website, postcardstotheuniverse.com. And in my website, there is the address of where to send it, and also how to create one, because a lot of people are like, I don't even know what you're talking about. I don't know how to do that. So you can learn how to do that on my website, postcardstotheuniverse.com. I share all of that. If you're on Facebook and you like to join Facebook groups, which a lot of people like to, I have one called Postcards of Love, and we share funny, uplifting posts. I always share lots of animal stuff because I'm such an animal person, good stories. I just love it. So you can join me over there, and you could share fun, loving, and uplifting posts. So each week, I share I call them a magical message, and I post them on social media. And it's an image of a manifesting postcard that I photograph with an affirmation because I love affirmations. I work with affirmations all the time, and I like to work on affirmations daily and weekly. I think they're a powerful way for them to become a new belief in our lives, and I use my photography sort of to enhance this. So this week's magical message is cherish each other, and it's pretty, self-explanatory. What that means, cherish each other. I think we need to cherish each other more. But I wanted to add a poem I found that I believe fits this week's affirmation and this week's postcard. So the poem is by Sue Elson, and I'm going to read it. This is what she says. Cherish the moments, the tears, the laughter. Cherish the thoughts, the times that matter. Cherish the choices, the fears, the banter. Cherish the voices of friends that linger. We are sold a romance that resides in one person, but reality shows us that is just a distraction. For the truth is there in plain view. It seems our friends already knew our times of need, they are there to feed. Our loss, our love will ultimately be freed. As I reflect on the journey of life, the people who come, the people who go, the people that I thought I would always know, the people I wish I could love some more, the people I cannot wave from the shore, I have come to realize that I must always cherish what happens along the way. And I thought that just kind of fit this week's message, so I just wanted to share that with everybody. Okay. So next week, I have Joe Graham, who's practiced in pagan and Hermetic traditions for more than 30 years. And Graham introduces readers in her book, 7 Goddesses of the Hellenistic World, Ancient Worship for Modern Times, to the history and mythology of 7 Hellenistic goddesses, and teaches us how to work with each one in our spiritual practice. With the help of these powerful deities, you can improve your luck, resilience, teamwork, transformation, and more. So that's who's going to be with me next week. So tune in for that. But to get to my guest today, Dana Sardano is the owner, resident artist, and intuitive at, I hope I pronounced this right, Ubuntu Fish Gallery in Stuart, Florida, a published author and co-founder, chief officer of curriculum at finduniquelyyou.com, and she'll let me know if I'm saying it right. Ubuntu. Dana has authored several books, all centered around personal growth and wellness. She wrote and illustrated her first book, Veda Finds Her Crown, a book centered around chakra health and development to help aid teachers, parents, and caretakers who are educating the whole child. She then authored 10 Recommandments for personal empowerment, on Decoding the Woo Woo, an autobiographical account of her own spiritual journey, written with the hope of demystifying spiritual practices by presenting them in a practical and understandable way. Dana's goal is to act as a bridge between the mainstream and the metaphysical communities so that those on the quest for personal growth and development can do so without being deterred by sometimes fearful and biased conceptions of spirituality. She is offering a Meet the Author Q&A and workshop based on her 10 Recommandments for personal empowerment, Veda Finds Her Crown, and Decoding the Woo Woo on audio, narrated by Dana, exclusively on finduniquelyyou.com. That's finduniquelyyou.com. Welcome, Dana. Thanks for joining me today.
Oh, my goodness. I've been listening for the last 10 minutes, and I love you. Oh, my goodness. You're awesome. You're awesome.
Thank you. It's been crazy getting started today. I don't know. Maybe it's both of our energy or something.
Oh, I'm going to tell you, I'm smiling from ear to ear. When you announced no commercials, I was like, sweet. You picked the right guest to not have to break up with commercials.
Well, that's good. I know, because my producer, Chris, he's so great. He's messaging me. We have to do no commercials today. I'll explain it when you call in. And but when you're dealing with anything technical, that's what happens, right? It's just life.
Yeah.
And we're live, so we got to do it live. But I'm just so interested to talk to you because I read 2 of your books, The Recommandments for Personal Empowerment and Decoding the Woo Woo. And we're going to talk mostly about those. And I love the Recommandments, so I thought we'll start going through some of them and what they mean, because they're perfect for everybody, right? For everybody who's going to be listening. But before we do, I'm going to let you share a little bit about yourself and your background, because you have obviously I know a lot from especially reading Decoding the Woo Woo, which you really is autobiographical of your life and where you've gotten to where you are now. So I'll let you share in your own words.
That's right. It just dawned on me. If you read both those books, you know me inside and out.
I do know pretty well.
Yeah. So Decoding the Woo Woo, it really chronicles the journey, the spiritual journey, like chronologically. But whereas 10 Recs, I use anecdotes for, just they're not in any order necessarily, but they give you some insight. But just to let your listeners have a better understanding of who I am, I'm a career educator. I graduated college with a degree in special education and built my entire career around that. And I was teacher, administrator, educator, however you want to look at it, for about 25 years. And nothing art related, nothing like that. I taught English and history mostly. I was a dean of students. I suspended kids, the whole nine, like they're full on teacher. And in 2015, and I joke when I say by happenstance, but I picked up a paintbrush for the first time since I was, kid, middle school, high school, and awoke something in me, a creative aspect of myself that was dormant for a few decades. And my whole life changed. I painted every day from the time that I painted that first night. And then just everything unfolded after that. I basically said yes to all things that felt good creatively. And I have a super supportive husband. And I wound up within the span of, 2015, within the span of 2 years, leading a six-figure job, a six-figure career, my entire identity, and then just following the artist's dream, which unintentionally turned into, the spiritual journey, the rediscovery of self, if you will. And now I sit here with you having, I own an art gallery, an intuitive lounge. I partnered up in a couple business ventures. I've written a few books, and life is beautiful and magical because I listened.
It's funny that you with the creativity, because I always talk about how to use creativity in manifesting. And it's like, that's what you did without really kind of knowing that that's what you were doing. You just sort of got so sparked and you found something and you were like, wow, I really like this. And it really shifted your life in a different direction. Okay, now say the name of your gallery. Is it Ubuntu? I can't for some reason.
You were good. The first one was a little butchered, but the second one you pulled it off. It's Ubuntu. It's all ooze. Ubuntu.
Ubuntu. Yeah, it doesn't feel natural, but it's an African word, right? It means, What does it mean?
The direct translation is "I am because we are," and it's all about unity, consciousness, and connectedness.
Right, which is what a lot of what you talk about. Yeah, because Dana gets super raw, especially in Decoding the Woo Woo, about your relationships, your estrangement from your parents. Your first marriage, you lay it all out on the table. But what I found really good and interesting about it is I think so many people can relate, because especially in what you're doing now, what I'm doing, and you hear like this mystical, and like we'll use the word woo woo, right? Like people think like, oh, it's all happy butterflies and light and fairies and rainbows and unicorns. And that's not what it is at all, at all, right?
No.
No, you usually go through a lot of pain, and you have a lot of trauma in your back, in your history, in your life. And I think sometimes that forces us to take a look at what's really going on inside. And we start to do the self-discovery, which is how you lay out, really both books, but, you talk more in your personal thing in your woo-woo book than in your recommendments. I love it. It's like recommendations plus commandments together.
Yeah. I call it, a joke. I call it the recommendments because, like, I'm not saying you have to do these things, but I'm recommending you do it if you want your life to be nice.
Yeah, no, it's clever. I like the way you put it together, and it is very, very easy to follow. So Okay, so the Recommandments book came out before the Decoding the Woo Woo, correct? Do I have that right in the right order?
Yeah. They were actually back to back, like I wrote them back to back, but the Recommandments came first. And when you think about it, just logically, we have to clear out our gunk, of our trauma, like you said, and of the disruptions in our lives, and align ourselves before we go on, even though it's part of the spiritual journey, before like the fun stuff that people think you're in the woods with crystals in your hands dancing under the moonlight.
Yeah.
Before that stuff happens, you have to go through the Recommandments and really, clear out the gunk, like I said.
Yeah. Well, what do you think was the turning point for you? Because, I mean, your childhood was not easy, especially, I'm Italian, and I'm super close with my parents, even though they drive me crazy, you know what I mean? And it's like, so I was really struck by, your estrangement, with your mom, and she passed away, and your brother, and then your dad, and you guys reconnected. I mean, that's very different from my background and my family background. So, I know you ran away as a kid and, what were you, 14? That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you'll totally relate to this as an Italian woman. So like, we growing up, because remember, it was a solid.
I'm from New Jersey too. I'm from New Jersey also.
You get it. So
I was laughing.
I'm gonna restrain myself and not ask you what exit, but yeah, Jersey. But what you'll understand is, my family was intact, even though it was dysfunctional. It was intact until I was about 12. And then my parents got separated. Then they got divorced, around 13, 14. And then 14, again, the rest is in the book, how I took off. And, but the Italian family structure. So we kind of favored my father's side of the family. Like we spent more time with my uncles and my cousins. So, every Sunday you're at your grandmother's house. Every holiday is like a big deal. It is about the family. But when my mother and father got divorced, it was like really, really ugly between them. But when I became estranged from my father and my brother shortly after, so it was my mother, obviously, and then me. And then shortly after, I'm talking about within weeks, my brother had a falling out. And it was no longer like it was completely split from my father, but his entire, how Italians are, his entire side of the family, or my paternal side of the family, they completely cut us off. And there was some money there, so I guess it was like to kind of like freeze us out. And so we would come, back, whatever, begging for whatever. And and at the time, you don't know it's going to go a month, 2 months, 6 years, 20 years, you don't know that. And so to go from that kind of family structure, that belief in family and culture and holiday and all those food, all those things that go with that sort of structure, to nothing. To living in a one-bedroom. So I don't get into this in the book, but I went from that with some relative affluence to living in a one-bedroom apartment. Because I wound up with my mother eventually, living in a one-bedroom apartment with my mother and my brother and my dog. You're not allowed to have dogs, and driving an hour to get to school because like the whole thing. It got really dysfunctional, really, really fast. It was shown for sure.
So I know when you said when you ran away, you kind of went down, like you had always had good grades, the grades slipped, the drug use started, the hanging out with the wrong people. So what made you like do the shift? Like what was the catalyst? Because I think a lot of people feel lost, and I always believe there's a catalyst when we're in a lot of pain that causes us, that shakes us to our core, that makes us go, I got to look at something is not working, So what was the catalyst for you that made you turn it around?
So for me, it wasn't, I was old. So I'm 51 now. I say old, I was an adult. I was way into adulthood.
Right. So that's usually when it happens. Sure. Right.
Yeah. Right. People have their midlife crisis. Some people buy like a convertible. Some people sleep with their secretary, and some people, they have a spiritual awakening.
Right.
So, right. So I would say when I started realizing that my life was it. I was going to say we'll say in the crapper. My life was in the crapper was somewhere in my 30s, because everybody is learning lessons in their teens, and everybody's learning lessons in their 20s. And when you're in survival mode, you don't realize. I mean, like, I knew my situation was messed up, but I didn't realize that I'm in survival mode. But then in my 20s, when my friends were partying a little less, and they were starting to meet the right guy, and they were starting to get married, and I was still getting wasted every day, and then eventually by myself, and then couldn't keep a boyfriend for more than 30-day intervals,
Right.
And then in my 30s, it got really bad, because, as you know, when you don't discover the pattern, when you don't overcome the problem, right? The pattern gets more and more prevalent, and it gets more and more obvious. And so every guy that I met in my 30s was just a worse version of the one before. And I had no idea that it was me and my beliefs and my patterns that were creating this. So the turnaround, like I said, it was always a bit of like a fighter. So I was always going to overcome in one way or another. But the turnaround of living like that was when I was probably about 37. At this point, I had been single for close to a decade and really just beside myself. And I bought a dog because I was lonely, and in an apartment where I wasn't allowed to have a dog. And long story short, the condo association got involved. I had to get rid of the dog, or I had to move, or whatever it was. And instead of getting rid of the dog, this was the first shift. Instead of getting rid of the dog, I decided to sell my condo. It was like around 2008. It was before the market tanked, right? Sold my condo, made a couple bucks, wound up buying a house for me and my dog. And then my focus shifted, and it was all about the landscaping and the painting and the decorating. And it was all about me and the dog, and not about going out every Friday night hoping to meet the man of my dreams and being grossly disappointed and, and crying in my beer or whatever that was. So that I didn't even realize that it was unintentional, because I did have a choice. I could have given up the dog and just relived the pattern of neglect and abuse and whatever, And instead, I did something out of love and shifted my energy and my attention to the home that I always wanted. And next thing I know, I wound up meeting my girl's I say biological father, because now this is many years ago, since my husband adopted my daughters. That's a story for another day. But I wound up having children within the next year or two, and the rest is history. And then it comes in on stages. You know what I mean? There was that shift, and then I had my daughters, and I experienced unconditional love for the first time, and I was like, oh. And then I looked at all the adults in my life and was like, oh my God, you guys were terrible.
You guys were awful. Yes. Well, yeah, and you had the girls back to back, right? They're only like 15, 16 months apart, so you had your daughters back to back. Yeah, and then you're looking at how you were parented, and you're thinking, well, I don't want to parent the way that I was parented. And we're no blaming here. We're not blaming anybody, because your parents did the best that they could with how they grew up, right? That's just the way it's passed on, like DNA. The family trauma gets passed down just along with your eye color, I believe, right? So your parents did the best that they could with what they had. So and you decided you were going to change it. Now, I love the recommandments are great, because there's 10 of them, and you get very much in detail about what you mean by each one. But is it that you started living this way and something dawned on you? I mean, so much happened in between, but we only have a limited time for a radio show. So much happened. But did you think I gotta write these down, and I gotta create something with this, because this is how I've changed my life and how I'm living? Is that how that came about, the Recommandments book?
Kinda. When I was in my 20s, because I always had, I was always I take this with a grain of salt, of course, but I was always the insightful one. I was always the one that my friends would come to, and I probably, because I had a colorful life, so I had more wisdom, because you gather wisdom along the way when you live in a bit of a train wreck, if you're paying attention,
Yeah.
And so in my 20s, I always made a joke that I was going to write a book called The Many Lives of Anonymous by Anonymous. One of the chapters out here on, that's how evolved I was at 20. But then as I got a little older, I always knew that I would write a book because I always knew I saw the world with a little bit more clarity than I think, a lot of people that I knew. But in owning the gallery, I opened the gallery in 2019, and it's not just an art gallery, it's an intuitive lounge. So we would do lots of stops and groups and stuff like that. And I do intuitive guidance. And so, like when you're working with people, like you find the same anecdote comes up a lot or the same analogy. Even when I was teaching in school, I was teaching high school, I always went off course and taught them about life more so than, the other stuff. So there's always the same story. So in 2021, my whole family, my husband, myself, and my children, we all got COVID. We all boom, boom, boom. We dropped like flies. And while I was in my stillness, a lot of the wisdom that would come up in my intuitive guidance sessions kept plopping into my head, but with more clarity, with more profundity, more succinctly. And so in my, when you have COVID, you get over the part where you're like, think you're going to die, and then you're just laying around for 2 weeks. And I started putting the notes in my phone. I was like, and then when I was feeling a little bit better, I'm like, you know what, this is gold here. Let me put it in my computer. And I was like, oh, wow, there's 10 of them. And then I was like, let me do a little write-up about them. And I was like, I'll probably do like a lecture series or something like at the gallery. Like I knew it was useful. And then I started typing or writing, and I was like, oh, I'm writing a book. So I always, like I said, always kind of knew I'd write a book, but 10 Recommandments was born out of COVID. No exaggeration.
No, I believe you. Yeah. And I wish that your gallery was closer because, I'm in Fort Lauderdale. So you're in Stuart. You're not that far.
Oh, my God. I was in Lauderdale yesterday.
Yeah. No, you're not as close as I could just go hang. I mean, what is it? An hour, 15 minutes? I got to come up.
An hour and a half.
I got to come to the gallery when you have an event one time so we can meet in person.
Yes. Where in Florida?
I'm in East Fort Lauderdale. I'm right West Las Olas. I'm real east. Yeah, I'm east of 95. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God. I was in Lauderdale by the sea for almost 20 years. That's where I'm talking about, where I live.
Yeah. Yeah, Lauderdale by the Sea is nice. Yeah, so we're neighbors. We're really close. But Stuart's actually not that far. I love Stuart. It's a very cute vibe. It has a really good vibe. I like that town. I like Stuart a lot.
Yeah. It's a day trip for you though. Like if you're coming, you have to let me know you're unless I have an event, you have to let me know you're coming so I could make it worth your while. You know what I mean? Pop in from there.
Yeah, it's not a pop in event. But so let's go over some of the recommendments because I feel like they're universal. And the first one I love because I talk about this, and I talk about this with my friends and family, and it's, I shall not claim victimhood. Rather, I shall recognize that the power to create my experience is always within me. There are no victims, just opportunities to learn and grow, and I choose to learn from each opportunity. And I loved it because I think so many people love to be the victim.
Yeah. And it's like our society has created such polarity that everything is black or white or one side or the other side. And what people don't realize is when you think like that, you're forced into the victim mentality. You're forced because you're either winning or you're losing.
Right.
Regardless of the severity of that. And when we realize that we are not victims, it is just information. And what we do with that information is up to us. When we realize that and understand, then everything else kind of becomes easier.
Yeah. Well, and I don't want to say that something traumatic could have happened to you, and you definitely were the receiver. You were victimized if you were attacked and something happened to you. But it's living in the energy of victimhood we're talking about, right? Because if you, and everybody knows somebody, right? The person who complains that shit happens to them all the time. Well, what happens? Shit happens to them all the time because they live in the energy of victimhood. So they attract that. You're attracting it. That's what we're talking about. Not taking away, because I don't want to piss anybody off that says, well, this happened to me. How could you say I wasn't a victim? Of course you were. That did happen. That's terrible. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about living in the energy of victimhood where it's like, and I do think it's disempowering
Yo,
if you're
Lord.
if you're being right, it's disempowering. And I do believe also, especially in society with social media, it's what do you call it? It's getting attention. It's attention receiving. That's the only
Yes,
way you know how to get attention.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes. And just to add another layer to it, everything that is fed to us everywhere, from the news, sports, Hollywood, whatever it is, because there's drama in that. And it makes a good story if you're watching a movie, you know what I mean?
Right.
You know, underdog overcoming again, the victor.
Right.
But everything about the government is, you know, it's really, every news story is about pitting us against each other.
Yes. It's true. That's why I don't watch
And
the news. Yeah, I don't watch it.
Same here. And the reality is, going back to Ubuntu, you know, we're all in this together. We are all, you know, I don't want to start like quoting the Bible, but, you know, like, and again, I would probably misquote, but, you know, he who casts the first stone is without sin, right?
Right.
I totally bet.
Right.
But you know what I'm saying.
Yeah,
So
I know exactly what you're saying.
Right?
Yep.
So we're all doing the best we can with what we've got. You know, you mentioned when I was talking about my childhood. Yeah, I have no ill will with my parents. I've totally forgiven, because they were just human beings in their, whatever their belief was based on their upbringing from the dysfunctional people that raised them. And they just thought they were doing what's best. And so then here I am. But it's hard for the child to look at the parent like that. But if I removed myself and was looking at somebody else's parent, I'd be like, oh, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The mother was abandoned. So yeah, she abandoned her children. She wasn't aware that this is her pattern. Perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and that's it's so true. I mean, you're 100% right. I thought that was really a good first one. You know, all right, let's clear that out of the way, right? Let's just get that out of the way. A lot of shit happened to you. You may have had a terrible life. I know some people have had terrible lives. Like, I'm just like, oh my God, I'm so thankful that I didn't have that experience. You know, but don't claim victimhood, because it's not empowering you. And so then the next one is, I shall not become entrenched in my emotions. Rather, I shall trust my emotional guidance system and rely on this information to inform me of what I don't want in order to direct me to what I do want, which I thought was really very powerful also. It's hard. I'll let you share on that. It's very hard not to get entrenched in your emotions, especially if you feel somebody has wronged you or hurt you.
Yeah. Yeah. But when you think about it, if you really do carry the belief that you're not a victim, then it's easier to look at your emotions as a guide.
Right.
Right. So if I am in a situation where, I don't know, let's just say my ex cheated on me. Yeah. We'll call that hypothetical, wink, wink. But let's just say my ex cheated on me. And if I am of the belief that I was victimized by him, then of course, I'm going to get all caught up in the emotion of it, because I feel hurt and betrayal and all of those things. Now, the reality is, yes, I do feel hurt and I do feel betrayal. And those are reasonable and rational emotions. But to become entrenched in them and make them about the emotions, as opposed to saying, wait a minute, these feelings are crappy, terrible. And clearly, if these feelings are so crappy, terrible, then the circumstance must be crappy, terrible. And I need to assess the circumstance I'm in.
Right.
And then go from there. It is a guide when you meet somebody, right? And you get the ick, right? You're like,
Yep.
And then we ignore it because for whatever reason, and then we get caught up in some sort of dysfunctional relationship. The reality is that ick is our emotional guidance system. That's more of a physical guidance system now that I think of it. And that's chapter 8. We'll get to that. But these are just here to alert us. So if we could step back in these situations and recognize that sometimes our own, I don't want to use the word damage, our past experiences that have created pain bodies within us, for lack of a better way of saying it, are really driving the degree of us becoming entrenched in those emotions. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh no, it makes so much sense, and it's good that you say you look at it as just information. This
Yeah.
happened. It's
Hmm.
information. Yes, I'm angry. I may be raging right now. I may be hurt. I may be anything, but the this happened. This situation happened. So I have the information now. Do I still want to stay in? Let's say it
Yep.
is a relationship, or do I have the information now that I could say, you know what? This isn't working for me anymore, and I'm going to move on. And a lot of us don't. We like to stay. We like to talk about it. Like we hash it with our girlfriends, our family, talk about how terrible they are. And we go on and on. And what we're doing is just we're perpetuating it over and over and over
Yeah.
again.
Yep. And we're creating the narrative of these roles because every
Yes.
time we tell that story, we are the victim in that story. We don't tell that
Right.
story if we're the victor.
No, you're right. They should teach this they should start teaching this stuff in elementary school, right?
Oh my
To
God.
us,
Oh my God. Oh my God. So not only do I teach this, and I'm sure we'll talk about this at some point on finduniquelyu.com, I teach workshops on all my books, and I do want to talk to you about teaching one in your book. We can talk about that off the record. But
Okay.
I'm like super
Yeah.
excited to talk to you about that. But
Yeah.
but Veda Finds Her Crown, the children's, is not only it kind of is this stuff that we're talking about to kids, because if we could teach this to kids.
Right.
Oh my God, they don't have to go through the dark night of the soul like we did.
Right. Well, yeah, and it'll to give them so much self-confidence as they're growing up, right? When they're learning how to trust themselves, how to draw boundaries, how to create safe, how to explain themselves, ask for what it is that they want. They don't teach that. I mean, like, seriously, if you had me try to do geometry or like algebra now, I don't use it. I don't remember. Like, I don't need it.
But set the boundary, you sure as hell need that.
I need that, exactly. And so the third one, I shall not apply irrational belief systems and toxic behavioral patterns that no longer serve me to my life experiences. Rather, I shall recognize that these beliefs were acquired during a time of crisis. And I thought, yes. I mean, it's much longer than that, but I just read the first sentence of that. But that's what happens, right? That's when we get these toxic beliefs, is a crisis happens.
Yes.
And boom, we take it. Now it's ours. It's part of our story.
Now it's part of our story. And what we don't realize, if we don't go back and revisit it, I always use, my daughters are 12 and 13. And they're relatively well adjusted because I'm very conscious about it because, again, you read my story, you know my upbringing.
Yeah.
But I always use Nala as an example. So Nala's my 13-year-old. She believed in Santa until she was like, I would say like early this year. Like I had to have a talk with my kids because I was so tired of that friggin' elf. Like,
Elf on the shelf. Yeah. I have a 13-year-old niece, and I'm really close with her, and I think she just stopped believing like 2 Christmases ago. So we were there. Yeah.
So I think my kids were playing me for like the last year or so, but still, they still believed till like they were like 10 or 11, right? But the way I explained it is, when Nala was about 3 or 4 years old, we were explaining to her, like this was when she could understand it. You know, big fat guy, red suit, beard, comes down the chimney, gives all the kids toys if you're good, whatever. And she believed that. So every year she believed that. She had no reason not to believe it because the adults in her life who she loved and trusted told her this. And there was evidence of it. She woke up, there were toys. Everybody talked about Santa, everybody believed in Santa. But when she was 9, 10, 11 years old, she's got a completely different set of skills, like for rationale, right? And if she would have stopped and thought about it and been like, wait a minute, how could he do this in one night? And I don't even have a chance. And, and all of these things, right?
Yeah. If you live in Florida, a lot of people don't have chimneys in Florida, just FYI.
Exactly. But if she would have taken a minute with her 10, 11-year-old brain and thought about it, she would have realized that that was an irrational belief based on something that she learned when she was younger, right? And we do that all the time. We have 6-year-old versions of ourselves and 9-year-old versions of ourselves and 12-year-old versions of ourselves that we had an experience or somebody said something to us. My father said flippantly to me when I was 9 years old, and I'm taking it out of context. I'm not trying to portray him as the devil, but he really, there was full context, and he said these words: "You're fat and ugly, and you'll never have a boyfriend." And again, completely out of context. There was anger.
Right,
there was
of course.
But the fact is, at 9 years old, I am now fat and ugly and never have a boyfriend. So everything I did was about not being fat and ugly and about being as promiscuous as I possibly could be.
Of course.
But I never, with my adult, until I went with my adult rational mind and said, wait a minute, this is your belief system based on this one experience. How rational is that belief? And how rational was that experience? And we don't do that enough. So that's why 3 is I won't apply irrational belief systems, because the toxic behavioral patterns are a result of those belief systems.
Right. So if you have a belief system of that I am not good enough, why? You got to ask yourself where that came from, why you have it. So you can change it, because it's not true. What do you mean you're not good enough? Why are you not good enough, but everybody else is good enough? You know what I mean? It makes no sense, right?
Yes. Why is it out of your reach and not out of that? 100%.
Yeah. And then this one I love too. I shall not ignore my chakra health. Rather, I shall recognize that when I tend to the 7 energy centers of my inner world, my outer world reflects that internal health and wellness. And that is so true. The more I do this, the more authors talk to, people like you, the more how I know about energy now that I never 10 years ago, I didn't even really understand. It makes so much sense that when our chakras, our energy centers are not aligned, how that manifests in our world. And you get really into each chakra and what it represents and what part of, early childhood, the root chakra, and, you go through all of that, which is really very helpful for people who might not really understand what the chakras are. So I thought that was really good.
Yeah, what's cool is I don't do the whole this crystal and that meditation.
No.
It's about the reality. I compare it to Maslow's hierarchy of needs and how at each developmental stage, a different chakra has a different resonance, and how, again, ignoring, not properly processing certain circumstances in our lives can create dysfunction in that chakra. And that's what my Veda book, for the kids, the entire thing is about chapter 4, is about recommendment 4.
I gotta get that book, because I would love my niece to read that book. I think.
13 really years old?
Yes. She's 13. She's turning, actually her birthday's Friday. She'll be 13 on Friday. Yeah, she should read that. Like you talk about, like the root chakra, which is our first chakra, is, our sense of safety and security, right? So if there's a trauma that happens in the root chakra, it does affect your sense of safety. And interestingly enough, I know that to be true personally, because my sister, who passed away in June, was born just a couple years after me, and she was born disabled, developmentally disabled. So there was a lot of trauma in the house going around that. My parents were great. They did everything they could, and but they had total focus on my sister, and here I am, not even 3 yet. And this rocked my world. So there it is. And it totally manifested in all my relationships after that. Totally.
Yeah. It all makes sense. Oh, I just got
to It took me a while to discover that by asking the kinds of questions that you pose us to ask ourselves as we're going through the book. Because you have in each chapter like a list of questions. Ask yourself this. Why am I thinking this? Why is this? And I really do think that helps us get clarity.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. That's why I love Ten Recs. Like, I know I wrote it, but what I love about it is, I tell the stories because the stories are, like I'm here in the trenches with you. I'm not in an ivory tower going, you should do this. Like, no, it sucks. I know what sucks is like. I know what sucks feels like,
Right.
But then I'm very specific and say, hey, try this. It's not my story, it's yours. But if you apply some of these exercises, you may get to the bottom of yours.
Yes. And it really does. And I love this one is so perfect because it's so simple, but it's powerful. I shall not settle for anything less than my general contentment. Just your contentment. It's just being content. You're not saying you have to be over the moon. You have to be like so joyous that you feel like you want to fly. Just, am I feeling in this situation okay? Am I content here? Am I with these people? Do I feel content? That's it. That's all you have to ask yourself.
It. And we don't do that. Like, I can't even tell you, like, how often, like, I learned how to start asking myself that question after I met my husband. Yeah. Because he would be like, are you cold? I'm like, I'm fine. And then I'd be like, let me give you a blanket. Oh, he's the best, my schmoopy. But then he'd give me a blanket. And I'm like, oh my God, why would I have been uncomfortable if I could be comfortable? Like, what the hell?
Right. And that has a lot to do, especially if you come from a codependent family, because you always put your needs aside for them. So you're not really content. You're not really content. You're just pretending you are because you want to look like you're taking care of everybody else because you got to do that. But you're not really taking care of yourself. And it's just simple, just taking care of yourself. So, I love that. It was like so powerful. This one's hard. The next one.
Oh, number chapter 6 was 50 pages. It was crazy.
I shall not judge, attach, or expect anything from anyone or any situation. That one's a tough one. That's really tough. And I think it's tough for all of us. I don't know. Maybe the Dalai Lama would be probably the only person who lives it. Yeah, it's a challenge. It's a challenge. So do you catch yourself working on that one a lot specifically?
I'll be honest. I'm pretty good, and I've always kind of been this way, but I've gotten better with the judgment. I'm not really judgy. Like, I always have been able to, like, understand people. Yeah. It's like, we all have our own gifts, right? Like, this is definitely my... And to understand, like, where people are coming from and, like, why they behave the way they behave and stuff like that. So judgment's good. Attachment, and expectation. So expectation, I've gotten better because we always are disappointed when we have an expectation.
Right.
And it's expectation and attachment are kind of like they link arms with one another, because, like, I could have, how people talk about setting intentions, right? So it's important. You're talking about manifesting, right? It's important to set an intention, but then don't get attached to that intention. And there's a fine line. There's a dance there. So if I could say with clarity, and again, I was listening to what you were saying about the manifestation, I want to be financially free. I want financial freedom. Okay. Let's be more specific. What do I want that to look like? Well, I want residual income. I don't want to keep creating paintings. I want to create them in a way that I could get a licensing or something, that I can get residual income, and then leave it there. If I become too attached to exactly how that's going to happen, Target's going to call me and put my pictures on their shirts, and then I'm so attached to that, then there's always going to be disappointment. So the chapter or the recommendment really talks about bringing awareness to it and, like, questioning ourselves. When are we being judgy? When are we attached? And all the things we're attached to, identity, stuff, all of these things, career. So that's all. But you're right. It is a bit of a bitch. I'm not gonna.
That one, It's I think it's the longest chapter too. It's good. It's good though, because it really makes you think. But because I have expectations. I have expectations from my family and friends because I give so much, so I expect it. And I've been disappointed many times. So it is a continuing work in progress.
We're all the work in progress, right?
Yeah, and this one is interesting. I shall not refute the truth and deny the solution to that truth. Just clarify that, what you mean a little bit more with that one.
That's really about denial. You know what I mean? Okay. Like, we don't want to see it. And I really get into talking about awareness and willingness. People, why can't I find success or why can't I find happiness? There's two major components, awareness and willingness. You could be aware of the problem, but if you're not willing to do anything about it, you got a problem. Or you could be willing, you could, have done everything, read all the books, done all the stuff. But if you don't have a clear awareness to what the problem is or where it comes from or the root cause, then you're kind of stuck. So, and again, that denial part is about the lack of willingness or just the refusal to have any awareness.
Yeah,
So
a lot of us live in denial. A lot of us live in denial. We really do. Yeah.
Yes. and I'm one of those people. Like, again, I'm not in the shower going, listen, dummies. Like, that's like, I write books and I wake up and I'm like, oh, you did that thing again. You did recommendment 4 again, you know? Or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, it's true. A lot of us don't want to see the truth, and we all get there in our own way. The next one is obvious. I shall not abuse my body with words, substances, food, actions, or neglect by ignoring its messages when it speaks to me. I mean, that one we know. Your body's telling you something, and you have dealt with some health issues, which we don't have time to get into, but it's all in the book, and she talks very openly about it, so you can read all about that there. I like this one. I'm just going to read, 2 more? Read the last 2. I shall not become so myopic in my perspective of what is that I can no longer see beyond the discomfort in which I presently reside. And the last one is I shall not live in fear, which is obviously obvious. But what do you mean by I shall not become so myopic? I just wanted to get them all out. So
basically, there's one of them, I don't remember when it was, but which recommendment was, but I talk about like living in the now. Oh, the contentment, being in the moment.
Yeah.
Whereas myopic one is, sometimes we get so engrossed in or entrenched in our emotion or engrossed in the situation that we can't see the big picture.
Right.
So I get so focused on this one thing that sucks so badly in my life. But if I could step back and go, oh, this is all part of this big picture, I can overcome this knowing that, there's greener pastures.
And if you apply that globally, right, you can look at it just in politics alone. If you're on the right or the left, you're so myopic in your perspective on the one side that you are not open to seeing the perspective. Yeah, so it can be applied in so many ways, right?
Exactly, and that's the polarity of, there's more than one way to skin a cat. You got to look at all the pieces.
Yeah. So, all right. So let's talk a little bit about your workshops and what you do for people who are like, I really want to work on this. I want to work with her. What can I do? Because I see myself in many of these recommendments. And I want to shift that. I want to, vibe up. What did you call it? Level up. Yeah. I always say vibe up, level up. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'll make it easy because I know, we're, for a couple of people who didn't have commercials, we're
right. No, there's so much more that we could talk about.
Oh my God. So if you go, anybody who's listening to UbuntuFishGallery.com, that's UBUNTU fish, as in fish, obviously, gallery.com. It's got everything that I do there. So if you're interested in the books, it'll tell you how to get the books. If you're interested in taking a workshop, it'll tell you how to do that. If you're interested in having intuitive guidance or you're curious about my artwork, it's all there. And then it'll funnel you to where you need to go.
Okay. So you say that you have a Q&A. Is the Q&A and the workshop on the 10 Recommandments? Like, are you offering, like, is that live? Is it pre-recorded? Like, if somebody
live.
It's all live. Okay. So people, and you don't, do you have to do it in person or can you do it online?
Oh, it's all virtual. So just to give more clarity about the workshops and the Q&A, stuff like that. And again, you'll see this on the gallery. It'll take you to finduniquelyu.com. And finduniquelyu.com is amazing because it takes content creators like me, like you, and mostly people with books, but content.
Right.
And we on the platform teach the content creators how to create a workshop, or we assist them in creating a workshop, and we do all the administrative stuff. And all you have to do as the content creator, as the workshop facilitator, is show up. We teach you how to use the program, all of that stuff. And your classes will be somewhere around 20, 30 people. And we, depending on the class, depending on how high the number, but we try to keep it intimate so people could actually gain. Like if I'm doing 10 recs, I don't want more than 20 people because I want everybody to pain and to grow from it, you know?
Right.
Like you could do awesome manifesting workshops.
Oh,
like
yeah, no, we're definitely going to talk after. I want to do one because I haven't done a workshop since before COVID and I miss it. I haven't done it, you know, so I want to get back into doing it. I miss it. So, yes, we're talking more about that.
Oh, for sure. So on Uniquely, it's totally virtual. I do groups, private groups, and you'll see this on the website. I do private groups out of the gallery. I do, like I said, private sessions, intuitive guidance out of the gallery. But the Uniquely, I mean, it's global. I mean, you could be teaching people how to manifest in Rome if you wanted to.
Oh, I know. I love that. Oh, yeah, we'll definitely talk. Dana, it was so much fun having you. We have to meet in person because we're only an hour and a half away from each other and do something. I'm so glad you found me. Is there anything you want to share in the 30-second minute mark we have left that I didn't get to cover?
I wanted to thank you for having me. I wanted to thank you for reading the books. I speak to a lot of people who don't read the books. And the fact that you read them and were engaged with them really means a lot to me. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I am a reader. I'm a readaholic. So having authors on my show is to me, it's not work. I love it because I love to read. I always have 3 books going at once. Thank you so much. Check her out. Dana, you go to finduniquelyu.com. Okay, guys, thanks for listening to Postcards to the Universe with Melisa, creating the life you crave. And I'm wishing everyone a wonderful week filled with joy, abundance, and love. Peace.
Bye.